destroying the Black. Oh, yes, this is also being recorded. All right. So if you don't want to be recorded, then you can leave the meeting, but we hope you'll stay. So I'm going to introduce first of all, Caleb. Caleb, will you raise your hand? Yes. So Caleb is a member of the Saturday Free School, which I will describe later, and the Lotus Collective of young people, Lotus Collective, a group of young people and students in Philly. He will be our Zoom host, so he will be controlling the screen. He will be muting and unmuting, and he will be monitoring the
Yeah,
chat.
I just jumped in, so I'm gonna check it out.
Okay, how long is that?
Okay, are we ready? So everybody's mute? Okay, thanks, Caleb.
Hey, Kathy.
Hello, everybody. I'm
Hey.
so glad that you're here. Okay. All right. So Caleb, you have control. You can mute and unmute, right? Okay. So, all right. So some housekeeping rules. The event is being recorded. Everyone should be identified. So if we ask, because you're on the phone, to give your name, we want you to give your name. There is no secrecy in this meeting. We are upfront and we are transparent. And so we expect everybody else to be upfront and transparent. The other piece I want to say is that everyone remains mute until you're called upon. We are going to use the raise hand feature, which I hope you know. And if you don't know, we can do a little tutorial on that. When recognized, you have 1 to 1.5 to 2, no more than 2 minutes to either ask your question, state an observation, or make a comment. And we hope that you will abide by that. The other piece is that we want to allow or provide everyone the opportunity to voice his opinion or make a comment or ask a question. So we will not be able to go back and forth, do that kind of debating that sometimes occur. The other thing is that we want everybody to be civil. We want everybody to be civil, respectful, and to abide by our regulations. And the other piece is that warnings will be given. And unfortunately, if we have to remove people, we will. Sometimes it's difficult to come to a large group and discuss, but other times it's not. We can all abide by these rules and respect everybody. I think we will have a very productive meeting and discussion. So I want to introduce Tony Montero, or Dr. Montero, who is going to give opening remarks. Dr. Anthony Montero is from North Philly, a North Philly native, a Du Boisian scholar and lecturer. He is formerly a professor at the University of the Sciences. I think it was called something else at the time, but it's that now, and Temple University. He is a well-regarded historian, sociologist, philosopher, speaker, and writer on the Black radical tradition, among other topics confronting human society. He is the founder of the Saturday Free School and mentor, and he is my friend, Tony. Wherever you are, Tony.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And for everybody that doesn't know, Catherine and I go back to our teenage years in North Philadelphia. And, the way Catherine is conducting this meeting is the way she's always conducted meetings, very orderly. But so thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here. And I'd like to just say a few words by way of introduction of Meghna Chandra, who is a very good friend of mine. And I'd like to say a little bit about her work and her research and its significance. All significant research projects have important biographies, and Meghna's does, which of course is linked to who Meghna Chandra is and her own intellectual development. And she is on the verge of getting her PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. But it was not an easy process or cakewalk. She was told by her academic advisors early on that she should be less ambitious and less comprehensive. As you will see, she didn't do either. Then she was advised not to link her research on housing and the denial of home ownership to the people in West Philly. She should not link that to W.E.B. Du Bois, the great scholar. She did not accept that advice either. In fact, her research is grounded in two of the most important works in the history of US sociology and history, written by W.E.B. Du Bois, his Philadelphia Negro, and also his great work, entitled Black Reconstruction in America. And it was through Du Bois that Meghna discovers the Black working class. That category of analysis, the Black working class, was a great sociological and historical discovery in the history of ideas by W.E.B. Du Bois. And Meghna follows upon that trajectory. Now, Meghna is Indian. She was born in India and brought up in New Hampshire. So being in Philadelphia is quite a leap in her own history and biography. But it is through Du Bois, and in particular, the work, Black Reconstruction in America, that, as I said, Meghna discovers the Black working class. But she also, as an Indian, discovers what Du Bois will call African-American civilization. Just a quick point. On the first page of the work, Black Reconstruction in America, Du Bois makes the statement that the slaves were everything African. In other words, the Black working people of Philadelphia and of this country are everything African. And as Du Bois would put it, a civilization in potentiality. So in discovering the Black working class of Philadelphia, I think I'm comfortable in saying, and I think Meghna will agree with me here, Meghna rediscovers what it is to be Indian and what the struggle of the Indian people for freedom from colonialism and how that is connected to the struggle of Black people up to this day. Finally, Meghna was told by her advisors, well, if you're going to study housing, why do you have to bring in the University of Pennsylvania? Well, for anyone concerned with gentrification, the University of Pennsylvania and Temple University and Drexel and other powerful institutions are unavoidable. The University of Pennsylvania, which at one time we in Philadelphia, we Black folk in Philadelphia looked up to as a center of education, of learning, and a lot of us aspired maybe to go there, although few of us did. But it was that place that we looked up to. But the University of Pennsylvania today is not primarily about learning or education. It is what I call a neoliberal monster, gobbling up the homes of working people, and in essence becoming an enemy of the working people of West Philadelphia and of Philadelphia in general. The university is more concerned with financial and real estate speculation and profit making than it is with learning. But how did we get to this point in Philadelphia? I think some of you, and I know Catherine and myself, remember the time when Philadelphia was a city for, by, and of working people. You might remember at one time, almost everybody in Philadelphia had a job. And most people that had a job were members of unions. And having a job and being a member of a union meant that you could begin to live out what I would call the Philadelphia dream, which was to own a home. And I'm certain that many here could tell stories of relatives and friends who bought their first home and the great excitement of that. And there would be parties and celebrations of home ownership. Philadelphia, 50 years ago, for working people, was a far better city. Today, Philadelphia is a literal train wreck for the working class. 50 years ago and more, as I said, most people worked, and most working people were members of unions. There was public education, which prepared tens of thousands of young people to work and to be citizens of the city. Most people felt that government could solve problems. All of that has changed. The city and its government operates for a small group of autocrats, oligarchs, multinational corporations, and these big universities, who, by the way, pay no taxes. Well, how did we get here? Let me just, to this economy, and let me underline this, an economy that does not produce. So you don't need factories. I'm from North Philadelphia. I tell stories to the young people in the Saturday Free School about how at my house, I'm from what we used to call the Tenderloin, in case anybody knows about that, where ladies would meet at my mother's house, at our house in the morning. They would drink their coffee, some of them would smoke their cigarettes, and they would walk to work in a garment factory where they worked on power machines producing garments that were sold all over the world. They were members of unions. These were independent women who were working class women. My mother owned our home. Others owned their homes. This is not the city of today. If you go, for example, Tina Marie was talking about Allegheny Avenue. Well, just go down Allegheny Avenue on the west side of Broad Street and look at all of those factories that are shuttered. Look at the deindustrialization of Philadelphia. Go over to Kensington with that drug market, drug supermarket over there. Well, they used to be working people. There used to be factories all over that area. The city has been deindustrialized. Young people are a surplus labor force, an army of unemployed, as we call it in sociology, a stranded population. Many are homeless, many are undernourished, but what is characteristic of a whole generation of young Black and working class people in Philadelphia is they have no future, and they will never own a home under these circumstances. And their government neither tries to build or repair the public education system or guarantee them a future. This situation in economics we call neoliberalism, or better yet, neoliberal globalization, where the city does not count. It is the profits that banks and speculators and universities make off of investments all over the world. And you probably hear a lot of talk about low interest rates. Well, you would think low interest rates would help the working class to get mortgages to buy houses. Well, you might be able to get a mortgage, but you won't be able to afford a small house on a small street, let us say in West Philly, which now goes for $300,000. 50 years ago, that same house you could get for $10,000. So the low interest rates creating all of this money, but the money is used by the speculators in real estate and in finance. Let me just get to how all this came about, because economics and finance is not something that we generally like to talk about, because the people that talk about it make it so that you can't understand what they're talking about. Let me go back to 1971, 50 years ago, when Richard Nixon took the US off the gold standard. That was very important because it made money cheap. Big corporations and banks could get lots of money at very low rates. Once there is no gold standard to the dollar, currency then becomes a kind of plaything for speculators. Secondly, these dates, 1980, when the nation entered into what we call hyperinflation. All of this money, all of these dollars. And so prices went up. You might remember that. Then the next important event is 2008, the financial meltdown and the economic recession which followed it. The banks, the big corporations, and places like the University of Pennsylvania were saved. The people were not. If you want to identify the moment when home ownership no longer was a possibility for the vast majority of working people in the city of Philadelphia, go back to 2008. I think 2008, which led to what they call the Great Recession, which was in fact a depression. People lost their homes. People could not keep up their mortgages. And at the same time, property taxes continue to rise, et cetera. 2008, I think, might be that moment when the city government ceased to be a government of the people. And I say this, forgive me if I'm, a little too harsh. Irrespective of race, creed, or color, city government does not serve the people. It has become what we call a plutocracy. The word plutocracy means a government of and by and for the wealthy. Our city, again, is a train wreck for the working class. And it's not getting better, things are getting worse. And as Tina Marie was just saying, previous to us starting the Zoom, you can't get your city council person to tell you what's going on. Even if they know, they're kind of beholden to the rich. Finally, the last event is the pandemic of 2020, the COVID, which we're still living through. The wealthy and big corporations have gotten richer, their profits have soared, poverty has gone up, inflation and what we call hyperinflation or out of control inflation is once again upon us. I say all of that only to set a context for what Meghna is going to talk about. We are living not in the best of times, we're living in the worst of times. These big institutions and even government has become, in effect, enemies of the people. And the question is, what will the people do?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for giving us the context in which Meghna's presentation is in. This is the context in which Meghna has done her research and is now going to present to us. And Tony, you have introduced Meghna. So Meghna, we're going to turn this over to you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Montero. Thank you, who's actually a model of the kind of scholar I want to be someday. I'm striving to be. And thank you so much to everybody who came, people from RCOs. Reverend, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And it's good to see also some of the people I've interviewed also here. I've not included your names, but a lot of your work is in this to protect anonymity. So I'll begin. I will share my screen. And thank you to Dr. Montero for setting up the context, because what he's saying, I really do want to talk about what has been lost and what is at stake, what is being taken away by these universities. So the title of this presentation is Need for a People's Struggle Against Universities for Homeownership and Democracy. And I want to talk about why those two things are linked, homeownership and democracy, and also why universities are completely against this in every single way. So this painting is actually a painting done by my friend Serafina Harris that's at the Church of the Advocate. And I wanted to include it because you really show the leadership of the people like Father Paul Washington, W.B. Du Bois, and the Black worker who's at the root of everything, and these row homes in the back. And all of these things are really the cornerstone of democracy in the city, and they're all what is being taken away by universities. And I'd like to get into that. Thank you also to Catherine Blunt, who's a friend and a mentor and a colleague. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you to the 46th Ward. So I'd like to begin, like Dr. Montero said, with the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, and I wanted to talk about a few concepts from his work, Black Reconstruction, that are very central to the way I've been thinking about my dissertation and just thinking about this problem of housing and jobs and labor and democracy in the city. So in Black Reconstruction, Du Bois's first chapter is called The Black Worker. And he talks about the Black worker as really the founding stone of democracy in this country, also the founding stone of industry, and how the agency of the Black worker has been at the root of all progressive movements in this country. And so, you know, he says, what were to be the limits of democratic control in the United States if all labor, Black as well as white, became free, were given schools and the right to vote? What control could or should be set to the power and action of these laborers? Was the rule of the mass of Americans to be unlimited and the right to rule extended to all men, regardless of race and color? Or if not, What power of dictatorship and control? How would property and privilege be protected? So really this idea that the question of freedom for Black people as homeowners, as voters, as free labor is really a question of democracy in this country. And if you stop the Black worker, you can preserve dictatorship for the wealthy and powerful, which is why the Black freedom struggle is at the center for the struggle for democracy. So I wanted to begin with that point. The second point from Black Reconstruction I really wanted to emphasize is this long struggle for land and how the struggle for land is a part of the struggle for democracy. So Du Bois talks about how Reconstruction is a struggle for land, light, and leading. In other words, land, which is literally control over the land, light, by which he means education, and leading, the right to govern. And he talks about how emancipated slaves really demanded, besides education, their biggest demand was land ownership, a place of their own, a place from which they can govern, which was only just given the labor they had done for this country. And this idea that if you have land, it's less easy to exploit workers. It's less easy to make them work for nothing because they have a place of their own. They have independence, they have roots, they have the stability to fight for democracy. So there's this connection between land ownership and democracy. And this was one of the things that the Reconstruction governments, which were in control of the Black worker during Reconstruction, really fought for. As he says, on the other hand, to have given each one of the million Negro free families a 40-acre freehold would have made a basis of real democracy in the United States that might have transformed the modern world. So this goes back to the idea of 40 acres and a mule and how that could have really proven democracy to be true in this country. So this connection between ownership and democracy, I want to really emphasize that. So the first part of the context I wanted to give is the what Dr. Montero already talked about a little bit, is the connection, why Philadelphia was such a democratic city, and what is the meaning of these row houses. I mean, we see these row houses all over the city, which are being destroyed by gentrification currently. But the significance of it is that they're relatively inexpensive parcels of land and construction that workers could own. And this was so different than other cities like New York, a lot of other northern cities. They did not have this housing stock where workers could own their own homes. And there was actually something called the Build and Loan movement that started by social reformers in the 1831. And the idea is that you give loans to working class people on terms that they can afford. So you have credit, but it's available on terms that work for working people. And this was even before the government started giving loans. That would be 100 years later. But in Philadelphia, there was this real democratic access to credit. And so because of this build and loan movement, by the 1920s, 91.6% of Philadelphia's housing stock was homeownership. Of course, that's been eroded a lot now, but this is so much in any northern city. And you know, so the history behind this is also that it was not the what you call the OPs, the original Philadelphians, who really wanted to buy homes. The people who really wanted to buy homes were the migrants from the South and also immigrants from Europe who had been peasants. And this idea that people coming from the Great Migration really wanted to buy homes. So this is a quote from a dissertation on by this man named Charles Neer III on build and loans, but African-American build and loans, which I'll talk about in a second. As he says, as African Americans packed up their physical belongings and left behind the rural enclaves in the South, they also brought with them their culture, values, and dreams, including the desire to achieve homeownership. Just as in the South, homeownership was more than a simple, rational economic decision. It provided a spatial dimension from white racism that afforded African Americans a space from which to wage the struggle for civil rights and equality. To African Americans, homeownership meant economic security from exploitative white landlords. It also provided a secure environment to develop and preserve familial relationships. So I think that is very, very, very important, and also important to what's happening now, because people wanted this as a space to fight for civil rights. And actually, so while African Americans were often excluded from the white build-in loans, they actually created their own. And this really comes from the Black church, including African Zor Methodist Church had build-in loan, St. Simon's Church, Shiloh Baptist Church, St. Paul Baptist Church, Miller Memorial Baptist Church, which I know Catherine's family is connected to, St. Paul Baptist Church, Calvary Baptist Church, the Citizens and Southern Bank Trust Company was a very famous one. And this picture here is of Berean Build-in Loan, which would be one of the African-American build-in loans that really endured even through the Great Depression. And I also just wanted to draw attention to this beautiful painting by Jacob Lawrence, which he was an artist that really chronicled the Great Migration, but I think it really ties together the aspiration for a better life, along with that, the home, the construction, building something new, building a new city. And, you know, that yes, there was redlining in the city that really segregated African Americans, cut them off from better housing stock, newer housing stock. But as we know, they really turned that negative into a positive. And these neighborhoods of Black homeowners became centers of struggle in the city, centers of self-determination. And they also produced some of the world's greatest artists, including John Coltrane and Lee Morgan. And they were really, these were really, this was really an achievement of the Black worker.
Just armor and intelligent.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to say, the other part of this history, I want to argue that this struggle for home ownership extends to the Black liberation movement in the 60s and 70s. And there we also really see this demand for home ownership. And so this Black liberation movement is probably in the first time in the city where Black people really control the government, control the city. Like Dr. Montero was saying, this is kind of, I think this is kind of has a kind of similarity to Reconstruction in the South, where you also had Black men leading these legislatures and promoting all kinds of progressive legislation. And so you see these outstanding figures that really represent the Black worker: Father Paul Washington, Lucien Blackwell, Cecil B. Moore, and they're basically working to broaden democracy to all. And they have a commitment to the poor and oppressed. So you have Cecil B. Moore fighting for control over federal dollars. You have the area-wide council. You have Milton Street, who has this movement to squat in abandoned housing. At this time, there was beginning to be a lot of abandonment of housing, and Milton Street leads this movement in 1977 through an organization called the North Philadelphia Block Development Corporation to take over foreclosed homes and say, you know, if you want to stabilize these neighborhoods, give it to the poor. Let people stabilize these neighborhoods and make them better, give them a sense of pride and ownership, and include them in this democracy. And so he really, really fought for it. The other very important figure I wanted to mention is Councilman Lucien Blackwell, who, speaking of the Black worker, he was also the president of the Longshoremen Union. And he really fought to reform a program called the Gift Properties Program, which was originally meant for middle-class people to come and take houses for free. He turned it into a housing program for the poor, which is absolutely a revolutionary thing that he did. He took it out of the hands of this corrupt white councilman named Councilman Gennady, who was giving it out to speculators, and he really put it in the hands of the community. And so I wanted to mention him also as an important model for this connection between home ownership and democracy. And finally, I just wanted to talk about Christine Washington, who was the wife of Father Paul Washington. And she was one of the founders of the Advocate Community Development Corporation that actually created hundreds and hundreds of units of housing for the poor in North Philadelphia. And she actually formed this group very interestingly. Speaking of this connection between land and home ownership and democracy, she formed this organization out of the struggle for education. So I think it was 1967, she was part of a group of mothers who were meeting to discuss the education of their children to support their struggle for just schools. and one of the members of that group was being evicted. So she actually said, we have to develop housing. We have to do something about this. So she developed housing. And this picture is actually from the Father Paul Washington archives papers at Blockson collection. And she developed units, and they actually really made a commitment. This and other also organizations that were connected to churches, they made a commitment to home ownership because that's what the people wanted. And also they realized that if we develop homes for people to own, it will also stabilize the neighborhood. It will create pride. It will give people pride. And as she said, our aim is to build a community and an environment that will complement the human being. We feel that running to the suburbs or other areas is not the answer. We are here, we can and will make it beautiful. And she also talked about how the residents of the smaller streets with their neatly kept houses and flower boxes as the section's unsung heroes. They're the backbone of North Philadelphia, she said. It's the people that make communities, her husband added. We are so inextricably woven into this community that to pull up would have been out of the question. So I think it's just a very beautiful example of a different kind of city, a democratic city, and kind of what should be. So I wanted to talk about the next thing that I think Dr. Montero already contextualized very, very comprehensively. But what is the corporate vision? Who are the players? And I want to argue that this vision is kind of the opposite of that Black worker struggle for democracy, because rather than revitalize the neighborhoods, build up the communities, it's empowering the universities. And specifically this idea of we don't want to revitalize the neighborhoods, we want to revitalize the downtown. And that also goes back to the whole history of urban renewal, where we're going to give money to universities, to businesses, and let them flourish, let them, and maybe some of it will trickle down, which we know it does not. This concept of the city of knowledge, basically we want to replicate what happened in San Francisco. If we can connect universities to cities, we can create these high-tech hubs. And if everything is close together, they talk about innovation districts, then it'll all agglomerate and we'll build this city of knowledge. And I think Dr. Montero already talked about how this is going to be disastrous for working people, because this is not a system that has working people. In fact, many of them will be automated out. And you see the kind of city that this has really created: a completely unequal city, a dystopian city, a city where homeless people are lying on the ground next to all these, knowledge and tech workers. So I wanted to just mention that. And also, some of the policies, and I'm not going to go into the specifics of all of these because I think already there are a lot of people on this call who are very well versed in the specifics. But, the universities, which are not paying taxes, but they are giving loan forgiveness to people who, specifically faculty and full-time staff. So that doesn't mean the subcontracted workers, a majority of whom are Black. They're developing cities through these university special districts, getting retail, basically jump-starting gentrification is the idea. The building of the stadium, I know there's some stadium stompers here who can speak more to this, that they're all a part of this plan to build this city of knowledge. And also the city themselves, like Doc said, the plutocratic, kleptocratic people in power, that these policies, one really disastrous policy has been the actual value initiative and the AVI. And the idea is that we're going to reassess properties, to be fair. They keep talking about fair taxation, but the idea is rather than tax businesses, we're going to tax property owners because they can't leave. And that's somehow, I really don't understand the fairness aspect, but that's kind of the idea. And so you see the spiking up of property taxes, especially in areas where Black homeowners live. So that's one of those policies. The tax abatement, which is just absurd. You let developers not pay taxes, encourage more and more speculative development, dangerous development. So I know there are people on this call who can speak more about that. The nonprofit tax exemption and this rezoning of the city. We're going to take districts that were single family and turn them into multifamily to spur more development. And also, I know people can talk more about that, but just to say it's all a part of this vision of, you know, expand the universities, expand the downtown, and basically make it grow towards each other. And I'll show some of that in some of my findings. So before I get into some of my findings, I just wanted to talk a little bit about who are the gentrifiers. And I think that there's a really important connection between the university and this class of people that you know, some people call the professional managerial class. So this is a group of people, and they fit into the knowledge economy because they basically exist to manage the city and its people and justify the status quo. So, you know, this includes scientists, engineers, technicians, doctors, coders, but also people who manage it, including social workers, city planners, architects, public policy experts, sociologists. And this idea that a lot of these used to be jobs that were done by working class people, but now you really need a university degree to do it. So I think that is a very important aspect of this. And I also just wanted to say, you know, Cecil B. Moore's, the whole movement that he did in North Philadelphia to control the community, the CBD dollars, a lot of that was to say, we don't want this money going to outsiders, we want it going to the community. The movement for community control was really against a lot of this group of people. And just a few things demographically, this class of people is much more likely, they're less likely to have children, they're very transient, they tend to move to different cities for their jobs, which is very different than the Black working class, which is rooted in this history. I also just wanted to make this point about this political shift. Whereas the institutions of the Black worker, like unions and churches, organizations like that, they were really mass-based organizations. And again, like someone like Lucien Blackwell, he was the leader of the longshoremen. But this new political scene, it's very much funded by donors. And a lot of money is driving politics now in a way that was not the case before. And so, you know, there's this shift in the center of gravity from local chapter-based organizations, which again is very important to the Black worker, like Du Bois talks about in Philadelphia Negro, this very organized community that's capable of governing, but this shift, you know, towards experts and, you know, and also this thing about a 501c4, which you don't have to publicly identify the donors. And the last thing I just wanted to mention about this class is, you know, it only makes up 1/3 of the population. So only 1/3 of the population over 25 has university degrees, but they have complete control over the media, corporations, nonprofits. And the key is this university education. And I'm not against all university education, but I think we do have to talk about the crisis of this education. What is it training people to be, and what is the purpose of education? You know, is it to find the truth? And I would argue it's absolutely not. And so, yeah, I mean, and just another thing, part of this professional managerial class, you know, you have these ideas and ideologies about the world that I want to get into later. They don't come from the people, but they come from the university. And a lot of ways they end up justifying the current system. So for example, a lot of these people talking about race from the university will do it without talking about the struggle against war or the struggle for self-determination. And, you know, a lot of these university ideologies will say, you know, working class people, they're homophobic, sexist, backwards, they're anti-environment, they're racist. Even Black people are racist if you follow Ibram Kendi, anti-poor. Whereas this class of people is so, you know, perfect. And this thing about virtue hoarding, I just wanted to mention. So I just wanted to frame that, and maybe we can have a discussion about that. I know Dr. Montero has other ideas about how to conceptualize this. So we'll get into that in the next section. So I just wanted to begin with some maps. This is a map of property tax delinquencies. So where you have this deep dark red, it's where people have basically fallen behind on their taxes, which puts them at risk of foreclosure. And yes, there are programs like the LOOP program and the Homestead program, which which are supposed to freeze people's property tax. But I think it's very debatable how many people know about this and how many people does it actually help. And also, you know, yeah, so I mean, you can, I think there's such a clear connection between universities and the effects of this. I mean, you can see so clearly, you know, the North Central neighborhood, Strawberry Mansion, just really decimated by this policy that was put into place by politicians to clear out homeowners. And then, but it's not even just directly around universities, but you can also see how it extends out, how this development pressure is really extending out and displacing a lot of people, ultimately putting them at risk of displacement. This is a map of the concentration Black population around universities from 1980 to 2014. And I think it's an important point about the 2008 crisis, and the way that it really helps speed up some of this university-driven gentrification by pushing out homeowners. So you see, you know, in 1980, these are very strong Black neighborhoods with above 80% Black people. You know, especially West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, even Temple. So you can see there was the effects of urban renewal around Penn already. That was already done, but Temple still has fairly strong concentrations. And then you see by 2014, whereas you had a tract with 80%, now it's something like between 20 and 40%. So who are these people? Where are they going? You know, I mean, this is not just natural movement. This is absolutely, you have to say that people are being pushed out. Yeah, and even along Baltimore Avenue, I think this is 52nd Street, you can really see the displacement that's happened. So this is population over 25 with the BA, and you also see how this band, again, this idea of expanding Center City. So everything that Center City is, I think Catherine had said turning Philadelphia into Manhattan, but really basically if Center City is Manhattan, extending it, making it not only so extending it west, extending it north. You see this this all around Broad Street, but also even into Kensington, like Doc said, into these white working, formerly white working class neighborhoods. I think this one is very important because this is about families, this is about generations, this is about, you know, rootedness, and you really see the complete decimation of family households. So where you have 16 to 30%, that means you have like, it's like 70% of people who live in these areas are families, you know, with children. And you see 1980s, and just comparing this to the whole city, these areas were more family neighborhoods than the rest of the city at the beginning in 1980. And then by 2014, you see it completely lost. Yeah, so I mean, where are these children going? How are children growing up in neighborhoods where other children are being pushed away? You really see the destruction of these communities. And again, I mean, it's around universities, but it's really having this effect into Cobb's Creek, you know, into Mill Creek, into Mantua. And I think what's happened to North Philadelphia is probably the worst, the most vicious, the most rapid. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is concentration owner occupied. You know, we talk about home ownership, and where it's green, that's where there's relatively more home ownership. And again, because African Americans were excluded, it's not, there's more home ownership in more of these whiter neighborhoods, but there's still home ownership. You know, there's still upwards of 50% in clusters in West Philadelphia, and to a certain extent, you know, Strawberry Mansion, there's a lot of home ownership. And you see these clusters of home ownership are completely wiped away. Same also in Kensington, Northeast Philly. So that is another thing. But this last map I wanted to show is concentration of Black homeowners. And the reason I wanted to show this is because of, you know, the context I gave earlier, that it's really these Black homeowner neighborhoods where people could fight for civil rights. They fought for justice. You know, they created art and civilization and humanity, and, you know, they fought for peace. But you also see what's physically happening to these neighborhoods. that to me really represent Black leadership, the leadership of the Black liberation movement. So you have this band here, and by 2014, it's quite eroded. Also, North Philadelphia, this strong cluster of Black homeownership. It's by 2014, it's quite diluted, and from upwards of 50 to 90% to dropping down 30%, 25 to 38%, and even in these clusters, like directly above, in between the med school and the university, it's about 9% and 16%. Yeah, so I just wanted to show that and show the erosion of that. So I also just wanted to present some results, because a lot of people in interviews talked about redlining. And so I did a little bit of statistical analysis of the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. And just to say, this is just of the banks and who they decide to give loans to or not give loans to. So but the thing is also that I want to work on more. The thing is, this is just banks. This does not include private equity, which is a huge force shaping America right now. They're buying up single family homes and turning them into renters. This data does not reflect that, but it is data of just the run of the mill banks. So yes, citywide African Americans, I think a lot of people know this, there is redlining, 2.85 times more likely to be denied than whites. But another interesting finding is that in gentrifying areas, people over 62 are more likely to be denied compared to people under 62. Whereas citywide, they're more likely to be accepted. And this other thing that I think is very important, in gentrifying areas, people who are buying an investment home, which means it's not the home they're living in, it's not even their second property, but it's their third property. They're more likely to be accepted compared to people buying single family properties. Whereas citywide, they're more likely to be denied. So this is kind of like the new age redlining, I would say, or you could greenlining, you can say, where banks are really trying to shape these neighborhoods to be renter and, and less homeowner. And just like Doc was saying, just how the country is changing to have less and less power for working people and putting more in the hands of private renters, landlords. You really see that reflected. So the last part of this part before we break for question and answer is this whole policy that the people in power are putting forward, even the so-called progressives, affordable housing or inclusionary zoning. And I definitely want to let the 46th Ward speak more on this, because they've got all the details and they're the ones struggling against it right now. But I think I really do think that this is not working towards protecting homeowners at all. In fact, it's probably the opposite. It's a Trojan horse for development, because a lot of this is focusing on renters and a lot of the definition. So what they're saying is we'll give developers density bonuses and all that so that they can build more. And in exchange, they have to include certain units that are affordable, quote unquote. But this idea of affordable is not affordable. And I'll let the 46th Ward speak more about that. So what is really using this policy of so-called equity, I think it even says equitable, equitably focused, community driven, but using that to bring in more development and more density. And if you see this building and you look at it, this is just on the corner of 50th and Baltimore. But if you look behind it, you see this is the block. This is a block of probably Black homeowners. And so what is going to happen to their property taxes? What is going to happen? I mean, who are you really trying to, what is really the purpose of this? And also, I mean, you see the classic architecture, the beautiful architecture that's really being completely disrespected by something like this. So yeah, so I wanted to just talk about that, because that's a solution. And now we can break for questions and answers and have a discussion, especially I know if the 46th Ward wants to talk about this policy.
Okay. So if we can see the whole screen, so we can see everybody. Caleb?
Yeah, Caleb, can you switch it to grid view or?
We're having the case.
I think, let me stop sharing first and I'll switch over.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Stop sharing.
Okay, now we can see everybody. Welcome back, everybody. That was a lot. It's a lot to
I know, it's a
take
lot.
in. A lot to take in. So let's breathe. All right, or exhale, and then let's take questions or comments. Okay, okay, so, all right, so we want you to use the chat, but if I see your hand, I can recognize you. So I see Reverend Chester. Let me remind people, 2 minutes, please. There's a lot of people here, but go ahead, Reverend Chester Williams.
I'd like to just ask the young lady that gave the presentation, if it's possible when she said the census, she could indicate somewhere on that to tell the people what that meant. Because if we got copies of that, we would have to take it to our groups and our churches, and they could be able to see on that this year with the census how to move people out of a neighborhood. So that's one part, because it's just her telling, and she give it to us with a title on it, we can explain when she's not there with us. The second part is that I feel as though that we have to realize that these contractors and the state, city, they're trying to bring in, and I mentioned this before in our citywide meeting, it's all they're doing is making the property look just like the projects, the old projects. Taking the people, renting them on top of each other, which you know from experience, if people are crammed together, it causes confusion and tension. And we do not need that anymore in Philadelphia. That's why I'm highly against these tall buildings. The third part is the ones that are coming in here, we should be asking them for, I forget the word they used earlier, consensus or not consensus, when they give an agreement. What's it called, an agreement?
Community benefits agreement?
Right, because in our,
That's a Trojan horse too, but go ahead.
thank you. It's a Trojan because it's actually what they said in the training class. We make a mistake, we going to jail. I'm just hitting that spot. But I don't like that at all, because it's like they're bribing you to vote for them to get in your neighborhood. So I think we should definitely stay away from that. But I'm saying that if they should come through, we should make the city and our council people realize, put some type of training school into these facilities that we can train people on electrical. I said that years at the city council meeting for them to have that, open the schools back up at night for adults to go and learn. Because when I was going to school, thank God, we learned electrical, we learned plumbing, we learned, before you can graduate, you had all those courses you have to go through.
Okay, I'm in.
Right now, we do not have that. And kids are coming out of school. We just finished after the plague, you time me now. We was teaching people math, reading, writing, and Spanish, free at the Children's Welfare Organization every Saturday. And we had the college, Chestnut Hill College students and professors came and taught the classes, and they got their internship off of teaching our children. So when they graduated, they could put that on their resume that they already got the internship. So I'm saying that we got to get them to work for us, that our people can benefit if they should get through the crack and come in our neighborhood. And stop sitting back, because I know you'll make it tired of me around my mouth. We got to get more people in these Zooms to open their mouth when they go to these RCO meetings with these contractors and tell them how you feel. Because they say, oh, buy right, nothing. If we got to sit down in front of your contracting area where you about to build, we're going to stop you somewhere. But we got to go back what's worked in years before. Let's bring it back. Let's block off this worker, and they'll realize they can't put in our neighborhood just what they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Williams, and Reverend Williams can go at it. So does anybody, listen, any kind of questions, comments, anything you want to share in terms of your own experiences? Oh my God, you guys are so quiet. Oh, Cindy Lou, you had an experience. Come on.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks, Magna. That was excellent. All that, the facts that you gave us. It was a whole lot. I'm glad this is being recorded, so I know I'm going to need to look at it again. I'm not going to talk about, unless Catherine, you want me to, our experiences with the property across the street from us that we're fighting still, but just to make an observation or a point that colonization and people moving in and pushing other people out. Okay, I'm talking about the Europeans that first came here and pushed the Indians out. Colonization can be directly related to gentrification, and what's going on now is just colonization. This is my opinion. It's just colonization with another name. But that same impetus still exists, and that's the way I see it. That they come into our neighborhoods, they put their foot down, they say, "Here we are," and they don't even ask. They just come in and they just take. So that was what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy Lou. Joyce Smith. Joyce Smith has her hand up. Joyce, are you here?
Sorry, I have to go off on mute. Sorry. Just
That's
really
okay.
quickly, one of the major challenges we have with development and working with not even working with developers. Developers are coming into our community because they're able to buy land really inexpensively. Of course, they're for profit. They're not listening to our requests for home ownership. We time and time, they tell us over and over again, it's not profitable for them to do home ownership. And so what we struggle with is taking a lot, because we're a historic community, we're in the local historical registry, and they're taking a lot of our properties and dividing them up into really small units. So that's one of the challenges we have, besides being redlined for decades. Our neighborhood is over 70% rental, and we just don't have the opportunity to bring more single family homes in here, and that's a problem. And the other issue that is the density issue. And one property on Parkside was actually zoned for 3 units or 4 units. I think it's 3 or 4 units, and he's putting 8 in it. So we're dealing with those kind of issues, and they're not listening to us at all. Thank you.
Yeah, what is your neighborhood again, Joyce?
East Parkside.
East Parkside in West Philly. Okay.
Correct.
Jackie Wiggins?
Hi. Thank you, Megna and Dr. Montero and Catherine for this program. I just want to say everything that people have commented on so far happens in North Central Philly too. It's all over this city. And I remember a December 2019 city council meeting with everybody in that room. It was Black folks, white folks, everybody, saying we want that tax abatement to end. And every one of those 17 city council members voted no to expand it or keep it on board, later on. Our elected officials are problematic with respect to everything we're talking about. So my thinking here is that something has to be done to take what we're doing tonight and just take it to every single neighborhood. There has to be something to inform the people, persuade the people that this doesn't have to really be, but you have to fight. You have to fight, as we did on my block, even though I've moved because I can't do steps anymore. But we had a developer that wanted to build a 3-story property structure on a 2-story block in North Central. We met and we told this man, you're not going to do that. We don't want that. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but we put a halt to it, even though he said he's been in the neighborhood X number of years and he's given money. And we also found out that some folks in the RCOs are getting money from some of these developers. So what I'm trying to say is that there needs to be more. I know Tina Marie Russell from North Central CDC conducts some programs. We got to just organize and just say, we're going to instruct people about what is going on and how this doesn't have to be. And I think that what Megna has provided with her data even though we do need some, some more specificity with some of that. People they don't know this, but they can know it, and then they can begin to think again. I think it's up to us to sit there and figure out what we want, and then confront these folks perpetually until we get what we want. That's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Sergio?
Hey there. I have a question for Meghna for the presentation. What role do you see there in affordable housing? I know that you made some comments about equity. There was just an article that came out in the Philly Inquirer today about how rents are going to be expected to grow faster than home prices. I know for a lot of young Black and brown folks, a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants, homeownership isn't something that we see as like a reality for some of us. And I feel like from your presentation, that's kind of like the solution is homeownership. But what do we do about housing solutions for people who are renters, who are seeing, on my block, we had 3 houses that sold during the pandemic that were for there were a lot of renters in them that are all looking for new housing. And I've talked to several people who have had issues finding affordable renting in the city. So my question is, like what role do you see in like affordable housing for renters in this? And how do you see it connected to the gentrification by not having those options?
So you know what, Sergio? So Meghna did the study. She found the information and she's reporting it to us. But you have RCOs as part of this presentation that can talk about the solution and the experiences, all right? Namely, Cindy Lou, you want to talk about your experience?
Sure, if you want me to. I don't want to take up the time of the group too much.
We can give you a couple of minutes to talk about that
Okay.
development of at 4701-15 Chester and the impact on you as a renter and on that on the homeowners, what you guys did, to rally the community, and what was the net effect of that?
So it was last year around this time that we found out that, as I said, some developers were just going to stomp right in and take over an empty lot across the street from me, which was formerly a dog park. And it's owned by the owner of a nearby nursing home. I'm from West Philadelphia, and this lot is at 48th and Chester. So the community began to organize and to have listening sessions and talking sessions and finding out everybody's opinion about this. I'll just shorten it up just by saying that in the end, one of our local RCOs fell in with fell right behind the developers and joined with them. Our council person, it is, and I won't make a direct accusal, but I'll just say their campaign funds, where they originate from, is debatable. I'll just say it that way. Then that's just my opinion.
I'm gonna say they came from 3.0, over $500,000.
Okay, all right.
Ed,
this is Councilwoman Gautier, who some people just idolize. A lot of these council people are pulling the wool over our eyes, that on the outside, it looks like they're for affordable development and helping poor people, but it's not going to be that way in the end. It was proposed that across the street from me, that park be turned into a 72-unit luxury apartment building, and a studio will be $1,380 a month. And under this so-called, the neighbors got together, some of the neoliberal neighbors got together and forced affordability on like 20% of the properties. So now a studio will be $870. That's considered affordable. We know who these rentals are being built for. We know the tenants that they're looking for. So we've been all as the weeks went on, we organized and we formed a group called Protect Squirrel Hill, and we did outreach every weekend and submitted a petition in the end to the council person's house. We got over like 600 or 700 signatures. We had sharing sessions, speak out sessions, a cookout, and we organized. Right now, after the horrible decision from the zoning board, who were in cahoots with the developers, we got together the money for an appeal, and the lot itself is under appeal. So everything is like really quiet now. We're going to put up a sign on Christmas Day that says, "Merry Christmas, we haven't forgotten you. This lot is under appeal." And so that's basically the story of like we're 8 blocks away from the University of Pennsylvania. And I also know too that the apartment building that I live in now is a so-called low-income building with many older people, Black people, other people of color. And if that thing goes up across the street, you know our rents are going to rise. And everybody's rents on this block, which was formerly a sweet, charming, everybody knew each other kind of little block. And now we're talking about a 4-story luxury apartment building. So
I want to add.
I'm shortening it up. Catherine, if you want to add anything, because Catherine was a big help, a big part of our struggle. So Catherine, if you want to add anything, but that's the main gist of it.
So I do want to add, when they talk about affordability, so they use something called AMI, some sort of, which is so like the median income, but that's not a median income of that community. It's a median income of, let's say, the Delaware Valley. And so when you do that kind of median income, you include incomes that are not relevant any longer, or that do not relate to the income of the immediate people, not even Philadelphia for that matter. And so, and they call that affordable. So it'll be, like 40% of AMI. So if the AMI is $90,000, 40% of that, of course, becomes unaffordable for most people. And so the notion of affordability, the use of the term affordability has been redefined almost. So it's no longer affordable. So when we talk about affordability, I like to say low to moderate income housing, or housing that is designed for low to moderate income wage workers, because that's how we have to phrase this rather than use the term affordability. The other piece is in Cindy's area, there must be 8 to 10 apartment buildings, completely affordable. If that construction goes up, all of those apartments in those apartment buildings, the rents will increase, pushing all of those people out. Where are they going to go? They cannot go to the new constructions, which may include 10% affordability. So what's 10% of 20? All right. Or it may be like 10% of, let's say, or 20% of 77 units. But again, you are pushing out people in order to create, what's 10%, what's that, of 77, that's maybe 8 apartments. So you push out 60 and you give people 8 back rather. So we have to be mindful of that kind of language and not get caught in the trap of that. Now, young people now, because Sergio, I heard your question. What's the solution? Well, the solution is not to go with their scenario, their narrative. We cannot accept their narrative because their narrative is wrong. All right, we have to go with the narrative of the community because the community knows what it wants. The problem is these folks do not want to talk with the community. They don't want to talk to the RCOs at all. They'll talk to the lawyers, they'll talk to the wealthy people, business people, but not the people in the community. So Sergio, the community has the answer. Come to us. We'll tell you. Okay.
Does the community agree that there should be rent control and that affordable housing
Well,
should
that's a
be defined
discussion.
as much lower than what they're saying affordable housing is?
Well, Sergio, that's a discussion that we have to have. But we can't have it if people don't come to the community. And the elected officials do not come to the community. All right. So that is a community discussion. And, we need to have that discussion. The community has solutions. It has a voice, it has solutions. All right. So the trick is now to come to the community, and for the community, and I heard that very loud and clearly, has to also become informed and make its wishes and its voices heard. So it's a two street there. So Sergio, you're welcome to come to the community. Crystal, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Just a couple of things. I think the idea of a city of knowledge was interesting to me because there is kind of a elevation of the educated that somehow they know more or more capable of making decisions for communities than community members themselves. But at the same time, many Black and Brown community members are being encouraged not to pursue higher education. Our children are being told, it's okay, college isn't for everybody, learn a trade. So it's fine to do that because we need all of those things. However, if it's going to create a chasm between the haves and the have-nots, that's a problem. So everyone still needs to be invited into the conversation, regardless of their educational level. The other thing is, I agree with, I believe it was Jacqueline, about just educating our community members. I live in a community that has a university, but the university doesn't engage the community. So our issues aren't necessarily, we can't blame them on the university. Our issue is speculators see the university and have identified our neighborhood as a good place to build multifamily housing because they know they'll always have renters. So the university is taking a hands-off approach and saying, we have dorms, we're encouraging our folks to live in dorms, but you have these speculators who are saying they see an opportunity. So where we've run into problems is I've suggested, and I'd love to know what you guys think about this. The idea, if we're talking about creating affordable housing and our developers are coming in and saying, we can't afford to build single family. It won't appraise. That's why we're building duplexes and triplexes on the vacant lots. I came back and said, then create housing opportunities by making them condos or co-ops, which allows people to buy something in the community at a lower price point than it would cost coming in, just as you can't rent a studio for $1,400 when you make minimum wage, you also can't buy a house for $500,000 when you make minimum wage. So there has to be some dividing up of the properties in order to make them affordable sometimes. But our community just went bananas. Absolutely no, we only want single family. We don't, so they want to fight. But I'm saying us as communities may need to be educated with more of this kind of data so we understand what to ask for when we find ourselves in front of a developer. It's not just no, and I'm going to stick my flag in the sand and it's just no, and I'm going to fight you. Sometimes it is a conversation that can be mutually beneficial. When it's a giant apartment complex, I don't know how you make that work. But if it's something smaller, maybe some tools in our toolboxes might help us to fight more effectively. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. This has all been very important and informative. Megan, are you ready for the second part?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So, all right, I'll share my screen again. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so I want to begin my second part of my presentation, which is about the political and ideological displacement of the Black worker. And I wanted to really talk about this because the physical displacement is something that, you could see from the maps, but this is something a little bit more tricky to understand because of ideology. And by ideology, I mean, as Catherine put it, we were talking yesterday, the ideas that people use to shape the future. And I was just rereading Du Bois, Darkwater today, and he was talking about how, ideology is also really a theory of who is worthy of democracy, who's worthy to rule, a set of assumptions about people and assumptions about power that, they might look like it's saying one thing, but what is it really saying? I think it also goes back to what Ms. Crystal was saying, and even Reverend Williams about education, who is education for? Who will govern? So I think those are really important points at the crux of ideology. So I wanted to talk about two strains of politics that are, and this is really coming from the interviews that are really displacing people, displacing what I talked about before, these Black political communities that were revolutionary, that were struggling for peace, like Father Paul Washington, but a lot of that is being eroded. And I wanted to talk about some of that. So the first is urbanism. I think we already talked a little bit about Philadelphia 3.0, but I wanted to talk about some of the, what it is exactly, because you probably come across it a lot in, ZBA meetings or even just, on that Facebook group, what is it called? Philadelphia Urban Policy or something like that. But really these ideas, these kind of dogmatic ideas about what's best for cities, what's environmentally friendly, what's equitable. But a lot of these ideas are aligning completely with gentrification. So urbanism is basically the school of thought that's really against the suburbs. So a lot of urban planners and architects, they're very disillusioned with the suburbs and just, the sprawl, the fact that it's only one kind of people. But the problem is a lot of those people have come back to cities and they're trying to put those same ideas onto these neighborhoods that are already that were already places of democracy. But what is it? I mean, what is it actually justifying? So this is a school of thought that starts in 1993. This is, in their own words, they say, we stand for the restoration of existing neighborhoods, the reconfiguration of sprawling suburbs into communities of real neighborhoods in diverse districts, the conservation of natural environments, the preservation of our built legacy. So it sounds good, but what is that actually doing in practice? So some of the things that urbanists are really against, they're really against single family zoning, because they say, this is, if we have all houses that are the same, then we're not able to develop affordable housing. But what this looks like in practice, it's a justification to destroy single family zoning, which, as we know in Philadelphia, is the way the Black worker has wealth and community. So this idea of we need to protect single family zoning. Urbanists are really against cars, which is, so this whole idea of bikes, they're so much more progressive. But I mean, a lot of these neighborhoods are, they have seniors, and a lot of these seniors have cars. And, this whole discussion about what's environmentally just, why are you saying that it's the Black worker that's so environmentally backwards? Why not, for example, the US military, which is the greatest polluter in the world? But that's another thing. They're really against providing parking spaces within new development, because the idea is that, oh, if we put in parking, that costs more money for developers if they're required. So that's going to drive up rents. But what this really means is that the homeowners who live there cannot find parking. So what is your neighborhood? You go to church, you come back, or you come back later. If you're older, you can't park in front of your house anymore. So you're really destroying people's neighborhoods and sense of place. But again, all of this is in the name of being equitable, just, all of that. So the other thing that they're really against, you see this especially in the Philadelphia 3.0 blog, and specifically the targeting of Councilwoman Janie Blackwell, is councilmanic prerogative. So this idea that your council person can shape the zoning. They say this leads to corruption, but actually that's the only way that the community can get their voice heard. Like, for example, I know Catherine's RCO went to Councilwoman Blackwell before she was pushed out of office, and she rezoned these neighborhoods to what the community wanted, which was single family zoning. But that goes against, that goes against zoning and having a zoning code. But who controls the zoning code? Again, it's this professional managerial class who think they know what's best for the city. But again, I want to argue that we had a city that worked. And a lot of that is being, eroded right now. They're also really for density and height. This idea that we want, the more we build, the more units, the more, and then that will increase that will create, that will go release the demand, which will bring down prices. This does not happen. I think there's been many rental units built. I don't have the exact number. It has not made rents go down. It has not made neighborhoods more just. It's just increased the speculation. So this thing of density and height, and again, this is really going against what the Philadelphia neighborhood is. This is a city of homes. This is a city of row houses. This is a city of beautiful homes. These houses, this architecture, if you read about it, it draws on Moorish architecture, Victorian, and, it's really an art that, okay, even if we're not building something new, let's preserve what we have. This is so beautiful, but you make more money tearing it down, building, boxing people into these little, holes. So, but again, this is all, I see Reverend Williams, he agrees. Yeah. So this is really that ideology of urbanism. So some of the groups that really exemplify this tradition, Philadelphia 3.0, which was really, it was founded by the Parkway Corporation. It is the woman who runs it is a Penn alum named Allison Perlman, who's a granddaughter of, just big money is involved here. But yeah, this idea of we know better. And if you read the Philadelphia 3.0 blog, it's just like, oh, like Daryl Clark, he wants parking minimums. He's so dumb. Like he obviously hasn't read this book. But again, who knows better? The community who's demanding parking minimums, or, this group of urbanists, so-called. Okay, so the next group, this is really something people really criticized. And I have to say that this is a group that maybe I would have been involved with, if I hadn't found the free school and really learned about Du Bois. And I think there are people from Reclaim on this call, so I welcome your comments, and we'll have a discussion. But this idea of new progressivism. So one point I want to make is that these cities are already places of revolutionary struggle. Like, for example, the district where Jim Roebuck was, he was the Pastor Lorenzo Marshall Shepard. He hosted Angela Davis. And just these are already very progressive communities, but you have this idea of, we need to push the Democratic Party left. And I agree. I mean, the Democratic Party is what has gentrified a lot of these cities. There's that, but this thing of coming in and taking over. Who are you taking over? Why? Why is it that there's this conflation of wealth with progressivism? And I'll get into some of this later. One thing about this new progressivism is the centrality of the Black struggle is really minimized. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's not a lot of the things that come from this new progressive ideology that a lot of young people have now. A lot of young people in this class is, to use acronyms. that don't, I mean, if you go to the community, this is not the language of the community. Something like defund the police. I know we have someone who used to be involved with the Black Panther Party, and she has said that back in the day, you know, we didn't talk about defund the police. We talked about community control of the police. And that was really, and everything that the Panther Party did was rooted in the people, love for the people. You know, if the language alienated the people, they would change the language, but really believing in the people. But a lot of some of this progressivism does not come from the people, it comes from the universities. And these are ideologies that say, you know, people are backwards, they're homophobic, whatever. But rather than saying it's the people who make history, the people who govern. And this is just another point is a group like Democratic Socialists of America, unlike the Black radical tradition, they do not talk enough about peace and military spending and the war budget, which is really something that was so much a part of someone like what Father Paul Washington was talking about, Lucian Blackwell. They were really linking what was happening to Black people to the wars being fought abroad. So we'll have more of a discussion about this. So I just wanted to, I mean, I think the thing that really shows this political displacement, the displacement of Black political communities is the election maps of, this is the election results of Janie Blackwell versus Jamie Gauthier. And I just want to make the point, a lot of people would say that Janie Blackwell was the gentrifying candidate, and we're going to vote for Jamie Gauthier because she's against gentrification. But one thing Councilwoman Blackwell did, she really, she fought against the property tax increases in as early as 2007. You know, she would say, she said, you know, I'm talking about transparency and conclusion. You can't bring me a bill you all sat and wrote in your offices and say, and that you took to the community and say, pass it. Well, I don't know if it's good for my community or not. I don't even know what you're proposing. And she would stand against a lot of the things that are so-called urbanist love. I just wanted to make that point, also against upzoning. So you can see like, where's the social support for Jamie Gauthier coming from? So here you can just see this is a dot density map. Every dot represents 10 votes. And this is of West Philadelphia. So you really see in the areas which are over 80% Black, that's kind of where Janie Blackwell's support came from, versus this inner part, which is where Jamie Gauthier, you can kind of step back and see it. But in this map, this is a map that shows the votes in absolute numbers. So the bigger the circle, the bigger the votes. And so, you know, 281 to 360 votes, all of them are in the less Black areas. And I just want to make this point also about density and votes. And so when you bring in a lot of people, that's really diluting these Black political communities and their strength. So that's what happened in this election. This is a result of gentrification. Yeah, so if you can just take a look at it. This is the election of Rick Krajewski versus Jim Roebuck. And the thing is, Jim Roebuck is and was a progressive. He fought against charter school reform when it was difficult. And he's really been someone who he's very organic to the community. But if you see where Rick Krajewski's base of support is, it's in this same area, versus Jim Roebuck. He had a lot more votes in an area like this, 121 to 180 votes. So yeah, I think that this is a consequence of gentrification, is these Black political communities are getting eroded. And I think that's something that's not talked about a lot. And we really have to get into a discussion about, you know, what is progressive? Who is progressive? What does it mean? And what does it mean that progressivism is so correlated with wealth and gentrification? And that's a discussion I think we need to have. It's an absolutely necessary discussion. And I'm looking forward to having it in the Q&A. So this next section, you know, I just wanted to, because a lot of people were talking about, okay, what is the solution? Where do we go from here? And I just wanted to bring up a few things from the past that I think are very relevant to today. This is from the Father Paul Washington's archives. You know, he talked a lot about jobs and peace. And so I just want to talk a little bit. First, I just wanted to share some quotes from the community. I think some people who are actually said these things are actually on the call. So as one woman said, you know, she said, "You don't got to change everything, bring something back." And I resent these people walking around calling themselves progressives. All of these people calling themselves progressives. That was Fannie Lou Hamer, her whole damn agenda. Mississippi freedom fighters. I don't want to hear this, excuse me. Lou Blackwell made homeowners out of abandoned properties. All of them Black people that have got them houses down in Mantua, University City, all that. Lou Blackwell gave those houses that are now $300,000, $400,000 properties, her husband and the gift property program. PHDC gave all them Black people them houses, and Jamie Gauthier can do it again. So, I mean, I think, you know, there are abandoned houses in Philadelphia. There is housing stock available. Bring it back into the hands of the people. So this is another one that someone said, "I don't know where all this goes. I believe that the people should decide, not a few people or a few businesses that have top dollar, who can try to control the neighborhoods and control cities and decide what happens, what gets built, what doesn't get built, and charge so much for building properties that people can't afford. And then they don't want to honor blocks. Like you have blocks where there are 2-story houses, they want to build 3 and 4. So a lot of that isn't in line with the community. The community should be in charge. I think that's also important. It's the community who live in these houses, not people who can raise money, not donors, who should really be having a say how these blocks look. And the last one, you know, if our neighborhood's going to improve now, how about those of us who had weathered the worst storm? So people who lived through all the disinvestment, all the crises, why not invest in them? You know, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about some alternatives that have come up in discussions, you know, putting house and land in the hands of the poor and homeless rather than the wealthy. I think something like what the Advocate Community Development Corporation was doing was very successful. I think a lot of those people are still there. A lot of those people are homeowners and they're still there. That needs to be protected. I think what the RCO 46th Ward is fighting for, safe zoning, I think that has to be clear. We have to protect single family zoning. And I also just wanted to, you know, this idea of peace. In other countries, there are other models for housing. And the way the discourse is now, we're not supposed to look at other countries. But, you know, like in countries like Cuba and China, there's upwards of 90% homeownership. And this idea that, you know, giving people homes that they live in, not allowing people to be speculators, you know, taxing speculators, not encouraging it. And if we are able to learn from other models, that would be very, that's something that we really need to do. And so I just wanted to conclude with this other slide from Father Paul Washington, where he was really drawing upon Dr. Martin Luther King's vision. And, you know, this is just a quote from the speech Beyond Vietnam. "I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack it as such." And, you know, this idea of redirecting of military spending towards housing and human needs. We must invest our national resources in building a just and peaceful society, not in war and destruction. And I think that's just, you know, because like in the whole academic thing is to make things very narrow, you know, and just focus on policies. But I think we've got to bring it back to the struggle for peace and this larger vision that people need. And just as a student myself, I know there are a lot of other students in the call, but, you know, just to continue to strive, you know, to choose a side of democracy, fight for the ideas that bring clarity rather than protect the people in power. And just this idea of democracy, what is democracy? You know, who has the right to rule? And really saying that it's the people, these homeowners, people with history, these families that have the right to rule. So that concludes my presentation. I just wanted to offer some resources. I can send it out, but these are some of the works that I drew upon. I also just wanted to say I learned about W.B. Du Bois from the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation, which meets every Saturday at the Church of the Advocate. Not this Saturday because it's Christmas, but every other Saturday. So I just wanted to invite people to come. So yeah, that's that concludes my presentation.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I see two hands. Let me just say thank you, Magna, for sharing your research with us, your maps especially. So I see Gail first, and I see Tamara. So Gail, you want to come on?
Hi, Magna, thank you. And Catherine, thank you for doing this. This is a conversation that I have constantly, continuously, ongoing in my neighborhood, in my community. I live on a 2-story block in North Central. I am second generation in my home. And I have an adult daughter who is now living in my mother's house. That is called generational wealth. I come from a family of, my mother was a domestic and my father worked for a Philadelphia Gear Corporation that's now defunct, kind of sucked in and merged into GE Corporation as a machinist. I bring that up because part of your conversation earlier talked about unions that created middle income family households. That's what I grew up in North Central. What I find is a lot of people don't know the history of North Central. They don't think about the factories around my neighborhood and the fact that North Central was where industry started. People came to this neighborhood for work, to work and to start families. The community was built up around that. I have aunts who worked in the factories right there at Broad and Lehigh at one point in time when it was actually a factory and not just a terribly dilapidated old building, which is what a lot of the young people and the college students from Temple University around here think and talk about. All they see is that my neighborhood is full of lots, old warehouses that are now defunct and trashy and dirty and graffitied, but they are not taught how this neighborhood got to be what this neighborhood is. And I remind them whenever I'm in conversation with them, because I think that's important. I think the universities do North Central a disservice because they have not bothered to teach them about the history of the neighborhood that the university actually sits in, and the fact that the university has a history with the community. I am part of the Stadium Stompers. We did fight Temple University and we still are, and we will continue. And part of our research, which people don't realize or should, and they should, as the Stadium Stompers, we did our research. We know about the university, what it did and what it did not do. We also learned and know about our local council and what they do and did not do to support and help us with regards to that and how it's being perpetuated. One of my current fears right now is that Bergman has been appointed the head of the zoning board. He's from Temple University. He's a retired police officer, and don't get me wrong, I know a lot of police officers. But when you have used, I say, your powers for evil over your powers for good, I have a problem with you. And I feel like Bergman is a problem. I feel like our mayor is a problem because he appointed him and he already knows who Bergman is, where Bergman came from. And when your politicians decide intentionally and purposefully to appoint certain types of people with certain histories around issues that don't support people, I have a problem with the politicians. Councilmanic prerogative is a problem. I live in a district where we have the largest number of lots of any district. And we have a constant battle with that particular council person in getting anything done in this community, because it was a plan that is beyond just city council. Everyone needs to be called to the plate. The Commerce Department that no one talks about, you know, city planning, the fact that you have these departments in the city who are only advisory, but who have no authority or responsibility or accountability to the people who pay the taxes that pay their salaries. We forget that we are the people. We forget that we combined pay their salaries. We forget that we should not be bowing down to them, but they should be bowing down to us in regards to what we say we want and what we need. And their job is to see and make sure that we get what we need in a way that is equitable and fair and moral. We forgot about morality. We forgot about neighborhoods. You know, I live in a neighborhood. I live on a block where I know my neighbors across the street, the renters and the owners. Unfortunately, I have maybe 25 owners on my block now. I'm also a block captain. I have been for the last 20 years. It's a job you can't get rid of. Even once you get it, it's yours forever because nobody wants it. I try to keep my block clean. I'm being argued with and cussed out because I want the trash removed. One of my fears, you know, I hate to say right now, is that our democracy is being eroded. You know, we have had the Dems in office. We have had Black politicians in office, and they have not saw fit to do what we need them to do. My neighborhood has been disenfranchised all my life, okay? And I can sit here and say that I have lived through the gang wars, the drug wars, the power wars, okay? But I'm doing what I can. I belong to RCOs, I belong to other organizations who are on this call. People on this call know who I am. They've listened to me, they've talked to me. I've listened to them, and I am very concerned because I know that the concerns that I have, they're not going to be resolved while I'm still here. But I'm hoping that, you know, I've laid a foundation for my daughter, okay, and her children and their children and their children. But if we don't start something now, not only is our history, our culture is being torn down before our eyes in our neighborhood. We have no sense of preservation for history and historical landmarks and the culture of Black people in this city. You know, there are so many issues and so many concerns that I have, and I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, and I want to give other people a chance to talk. But I just needed to come and speak out on this. I totally appreciate all of you here and everything that's been said and everything that's been done, and hopefully everything that I'm saying it, I'm putting it out there that we're going to do. So I'm on go. I'm ready to go. So
All
just
right, Gail, I got your number. I got your phone number, your email address. All right, but let me just say this. I let Gail go on because she said something that we needed to hear. And what she said is felt by many of us who have experienced what she has experienced. And I think it just was important for us to hear it and for us to record it. Tamara, you have your hand up. You want to announce who you are, Tamara, so there's no surprises?
Yeah, I am Tamara, you see him. I am chair of the steering committee for Reclaim Philadelphia. Reclaim Philadelphia was one of the organizations Magna mentioned in the slide around progressive organizations. I'll say that, like, as a really great presentation, I appreciate your thoughts and your input. Yeah, I mean, for me, so I'm a volunteer. I am a community member here. I live at 48th and Larchwood. And yeah, I've been organizing in this community for about 5 years. And I just wanted to say, like, I don't think this is a debate. So I don't want to kind of, you know, I have some counter ideas or maybe some my own version of kind of those things. I think we actually agree on the same problems. I think we agree on some of the same opponents. I think we may have, I'd love to have that debate actually. I don't think that this is the time for it here, but I just wanted to, I'm going to put my name, email, and phone in the chat. Yeah, let me do that. So it's, my number is 908-399-4178. If anybody here on this call wants to get to know me or learn more about what Reclaim is doing or what, you know, what we believe in, give me a call.
Tamara, we're not organizing. I'm sorry, we're not organizing, okay? So, but what I want you to do though, is to put forth your ideas or the ideas of Reclaim, all right? I think that's a fair thing. I think that's what Magna said, you know? So let me give you a couple of minutes to put forth that. And again, as I'm saying, we're not organizing, we're all coming together to share and hear, okay? But go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really prepared to give you a full presentation. What I'll say is we agree that there has been this systemic disinvestment in our community. This is because we live in a primarily Black community. So we believe on similar problems. I think where we differ on solutions is, for me, I think that we need to protect people where they are in terms of rent control. And I think we need to promote programs like social housing and community ownership, which are, to me, the only effective ways to reduce housing costs. Because to me, my goal is housing is a human right, a home for everyone. So those are my ideas. Talk to me, give me a call, 908-399-4178.
You know what? You just can't quit, right? You know, I am very blunt, like my name, okay? But it was nice of you, Tamara, because we live in the same neighborhood. We'll be seeing each other around. But thank you for being gracious, all right?
Thank you for putting this on.
So we have, hey, T-Ba, and then we have Sergio.
Also Reverend Williams.
Oh, Reverend Williams, I'm sorry.
I'd just like to make a comment on what the young lady spoke about. And the issue is that we need our elected officials before election time come to the neighborhood and tell us what you're doing for us and to get our requests, what we want in the neighborhood. That's a strong issue because we used to have candidate night up here for Chew and Belfield every year. And we got, I think every candidate came to our candidate night. And these are the things that we need back again. Even though we have Zoom now, they can lock in on Zoom and get the top people and open it up of what they want in their neighborhood. And I spoke with them several times without the council person and worked closely to get things that we need in our neighborhood. And like I said, that's the strongest issue that all the people are telling me. Why isn't our elected officials talking to us and listening to us about the problem we go through? Now, the young lady, I keep saying young lady, I keep forgetting her name, I see it up here now. That they're asking, where are the people going that's being evicted? Come on, people. They're going to, they're homeless. They're going in shelters. That's where they're going. Because if we don't stop this now, we're going to have everyone that used to have their own apartment or own house is going to be in shelters. We have to realize that there was a time when people had homes, and when they went to apply for a home, the bank would ask them, and this was the trickery thing, do you want your fixed rate or do you want the flex rate? If the interest go down, your rent will go down. They should have never been told that. They should get an affordable that they can afford and lock it in. because this is how many of them lost their homes. When the interest rate went up, their mortgage went up. And this was not told to the public. The elected officials should have came out and told the people, don't go that route. Because when that thing go up, your interest go up, your mortgage goes up. And many of them lost their home. As the young lady said, I think it was called the bubble. And that's how they lost their home. We have to tell it like it is. If we don't get out there, and I'll say in my category, more clergies get out here and tell their people in the pulpit, wake up, wake up. If possible, God will do the impossible. My people perish because of lack of knowledge and vision. And we have to go back and educate our people in the pulpit and let them know, get out and come to those meetings. See what's going on around you and put a stop to it. There's strength in numbers. If we come together, united together, I don't care what and who the person is trying to get these three-story and four-story apartments, we can stop that. It's just like we had flooding in the neighborhood. We went out and blocked the street. And the state senators and governor, Congress, people came to the meeting and said, Reverend, I'm gonna lock shoulders with you. I said, there's no reason we should live in a neighborhood where our houses are being flooded out.
Thank you.
And numbers, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you very much. Important point about what we can do and what we should be doing. All right, T-Bot.
Hey, thanks, Catherine. I appreciate you having us. I want to reiterate, first of all, I appreciated what Gail and Tamara and the Reverend had to say. But like for me, the reality is that the Dems have been in control for over 5 decades locally here in Philadelphia. And they've had a death grip on these incumbents. These incumbents have had a death grip on these seats. And as such, they haven't done anything because there was no risk. They weren't becoming homeless. They weren't having to worry about the mental health challenges, the police, and all of the things that we have to worry about in our homes. And I heard what the Reverend said, but I think instead of just asking them to come, there has to be an actual platform that they need to understand that is the only acceptable platform from the people. Like, we don't wait for them to come. There's more of us, therefore we're smarter. And as we organize, I know you said we're not organizing here today, but we do need to at some point definitely organize. And they need to be given the platform. We've got at least three of those district seats that are possibly running for mayor here in Philadelphia, which gives us just a little wiggle room to get from underneath this death grip that these Democrats have. Now, I am a Democrat, let's be clear, but the way that we're going, what we may lose with the governor, state senator, and the House, how things are being gerrymandered, we need local control to actually work for us. But that's not going to happen if they continue to be able to just stand up there and it's like a popularity show or how much money. They're not giving a platform that they have to adhere to. Now, I just want to say this last piece. Hillary Clinton was so pro-privatization, it's not funny. And they reached out to quite a few parents, Black parents that have been organizing around opting out from standardized testing, which Dr. Haidt was using to close the schools here in Philadelphia. And what we found was Bernie Sanders' platform was far more for people and not profits. And that's what literally this group Reclaim came out of. It didn't come out of wanting to do anything other than to work to push the agenda that working people needed to have. And it was unapologetic. And it was a bunch of young people talking, well, I'm a little older, but a bunch of people talking about what we needed over what the elected officials that felt really safe about just doing nothing. You got the governor that gave up 482 Keystone Opportunity Zones to Pennsylvania. 81 of those came to Philadelphia. Those are tax abatements. Like, that's what's been happening because nobody was going in front of a platform that the people designed. So what you're doing here tonight, this is important. And we do actually have far more in common than we do different, whether that's with a group, or not. Neighbors, pastors, academics. It's great to see all of us on here, but these elected officials, there's so much movement that can happen. in 23, I think it's 23 for these council seats. And it does actually not just start there, like what Gail said, who they appoint, who the mayor appoints, the zoning, the LNI, the managing director, all of that now has to be, we've got to consolidate the information and make sure that the language we use, a fifth grader can understand. So if we're going to do work, that's the type of work that we need to be doing so that we don't just have these stale behind, oh God, incumbents that are in office right now, continuing to reap the benefits of us not talking and working together.
Well, you
Again,
know,
thanks, Catherine.
okay, yes, and actually, I was involved in that movement too, a little bit. So I was one of those Bernie crats that graduated, so to speak. All right, but the issues, again, yeah, we come together, and there are a lot of things that we can come together on. And that's one of the things that we can talk about. So this is all recorded. We have the names of everybody, and we will be getting back together again. Let's see, Sergio, you spoke. Let me get to Jahan.
Hello. I wanted to just re-emphasize this point that Magna made, that the reason we have to study figures like Du Bois provide us a ideology with which to understand the current moment and the current crisis is because any kind of politics done without that understanding can easily push things in a direction that the elite is quite comfortable with. And I think this point is very important that she brought in her presentation of the centrality of the Black worker, something important especially for younger people like us. And this is something we've learned through our studies at the Free School. The fact that we have a history in this city, a great history of people who struggled in the past, and something which can be carried forward. And also, this all has to be placed in the context of an overall system, a system which is in crisis on multiple levels, on the economic level, on the political level, and the social level, which goes to the crisis of the state. A state which, as many people have discussed, a state now which on the federal level, the state level, and the city level is almost entirely in control of this ruling elite, which consists of a number of wealthy people, but also institutions like banks, the finance capital, and increasingly, as Meghna discussed, the universities themselves, which are heavily involved in real estate and are very connected to the banking sector. So this all means that we have to see this as a crisis of the system. We have to look back to this revolutionary history of people like Du Bois or the other figures within Philadelphia, like Lucian Blackwell and Father Paul Washington, who can point us into a different direction. And we have to be careful not to let this ruling elite define for us what it means to be progressive, because I think that is one of the other dangers which we must think through seriously, whether those whom the mainstream media or institutions like higher education are defining as progressives are truly the people who are progressive. And we have to work for ourselves based on this history and this ideology connected to the Black worker to identify what is progressive. And lastly, I just wanted to say that this point about peace is very important because, again, connected to the overall crisis of the system, there's so much hysteria about the U.S. state's enemies, where they want to distract our attention instead of thinking about the problems here that we're all facing. And also, again, the fact that there are examples in the world, governments, states, which are truly serving the people, which are truly people's democracies. Some of the states which Meghna mentioned were precisely the ones being demonized in the media, and which is why this struggle for peaceful coexistence is very important as well for us to consider when we talk about what it means to be progressive. So thank you very much. And it was great to hear from so many people who've been involved in this work on a day-to-day level. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
So you know, it's about almost quarter of. I want to say that even though we're talking about the Black worker, the Black working class, the white worker and the white working class is not excluded. All right. And when we talk about the centrality of the Black struggle, I think, Tony, you can speak about a minute or two on that. and in terms of why that struggle is so central moving forward. It was central to the past and central moving forward.
Well, Catherine, I don't want to talk more than I've already done, but well, where is it? Hold on 1 second here. Can you hear me, Catherine?
We can hear you. We can hear
Tony,
you.
we can hear you, Tony.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that indeed, if you take a city like Philadelphia, any attempt to erase the Black freedom movement, we mentioned Cecil Moore, I would mention Reverend Leon Sullivan, I would mention many people who go nameless at this point, who fought to make this a more democratic city. And in making it a more democratic city, to make it more livable for Black folk, for the working class as a whole. What we see is all of this is being overturned. And I agree with anyone who says that it's not just the rich, but it's that they have bought off the city council. They've bought off the mayors. The city is no longer a place for the people. It's no longer a democratic city. I'm not talking about Democratic Party. I'm talking about democratic in the sense of the rule of the people. The people are being eliminated. People are not able to live in this city anymore. It's an attempt to step by step eliminate working people. And anyone who would say that quote unquote cooperative buying or quote unquote more rental properties, without linking all of that to keeping people in their homes and fighting for the rights of the working people and of home ownership, which is also linked to permanence in the city. It's linked to the fight for public education, and it's linked to a redistribution of wealth and income downward towards the people. That's all I would say. I think that all represents what we call the centrality of the struggle for Black freedom. It's central to the fight for democracy, for the fight for peace. And that's historically the role of Black folk, not in an exclusionary way, but in a united way with everybody.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I see Mary McGettigan, who has not had an opportunity to speak. Hey, Mary. Mary's been in West Philly for a long time. How you doing?
Hi, Catherine. How are you? Thank you so much for organizing this. And thank you to the speakers too, and everyone who's spoken so far. I'm part of West Philly Plan and Preserve, but I'm speaking, as Catherine said, for a long time. I'm a fourth generation white West Philadelphian. So my experiences are not the same as my Black West Philadelphia counterparts, but I think, I've seen a lot over the years and understand a lot of what's going on, especially with regard to the university. And thank you, Magna, for bringing up Philadelphia 3.0 and the so-called urbanist mouthpiece, their Facebook page. Because I think it's important to know your enemy, and I think it's not an exaggeration to use that term. And I encourage people to look at their Facebook page, because one of the salient characteristics of these people is their disparagement again and again of the community, not only of the people who make up a community, but of the concept of a community. And they disparage not just the community, but its culture. And as if communities don't have a culture. I mean, they look at us and they see square footage and acreage and dollar signs, and they don't see the people, and they don't see the culture that thrives in a particular area. That's why it's so easy for them to say, well, listen, why are you complaining about your taxes going up? Your property values have gone up. So sell your house and go move somewhere else. This is constant, and it's a complete and utter disregard for the attachment that people have to where they live. And I think this is something that that we all have to get together and maybe write up some kind of a manifesto or some kind of statement about how important it is for the people who live in a community to be able to determine what happens to their community. And none of this stuff about, oh, you've got yours, you don't want to let anybody else in. We've heard, all the different arguments that they make. And we also need to figure out a way to effectively counter the way they try to, as part of the disparagement of community members and community opposition to what the developers are trying to do. And they say, well, single family zoning, you want to keep out renters. Okay, so they try to pit homeowners against renters, or you're against multifamily development. Well, wait a minute, multifamily is renting is cheaper. So you're against providing affordable housing. And that's why you don't want these inclusionary zoning bills to pass, because you're against having poor people move in, or you're against affordable housing. And parking, well, you're against, you don't understand climate change. You're anti-environmentalist. And so they try to hang all of these negatives on people who are merely trying to have a voice in determining how their community continues into the future. And I won't say it evolves or grows or whatever, because I think growth is just another euphemism for, get out of our way. We're just going to knock down your houses and develop. So I just wanted to talk about the notion of community. And very quickly, I think since we're talking about universities and gentrification, I think what's happening at the university townhomes is a disgrace. I think that should be, I think clearly people should make a stand there. When I was living in Berkeley, we had this horrendous Berkeley Oakland fire. And I remember it threatened the entire city of Berkeley and part of Oakland. And the firemen made this big stand at this huge old hotel in the hills. And they said later, we figured if we lost that hotel, we might lose a good portion of the cities. We had to save it. And I think university townhomes is sort of analogous to that. If we let the universities and the city and the developers take back what belongs initially to the Black bottom community, then that's it. I think the whole fight is lost. And so I hope people would give as much support as they can to that issue. So thank you for letting me go on.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Where is University Townhomes?
It's at the at 40th and Market Street.
Okay, yeah.
The town, they call it town.
Low income housing.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yes,
And it's about 70 units, and the affordability is going to end in next year. And just like they did with the Art Villa, with Mission First, when the affordability agreement came to an end, they cashed in and sold it. And now this property at 40th and Market obviously is worth millions. And the city knew what it was doing. When I went to remember when they had the meetings about the Philadelphia Plan 2035?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it was about 5 or 6 years ago. And they had all the city planners very eagerly showing us on their poster boards all the zoning changes that were going to be made. And one of them was the university townhomes. And I asked the guy, what's going to happen to the people that live there? Do you know the history of Black Bottom? He knew none of that. He just saw that the city had prime land that was going to, that was in private hands, and it should be zoned for them to build apartments and hotels and things like that. And so the promise of leaving some of it to affordable units, and perhaps returning some of the people they intend to evict, it's insufficient. It's insufficient. That whole property belongs to the community that it was taken from and their descendants.
That's well put, Marion. Let me also say there is about 40 to 50 thousand individuals and or families seeking low-income housing. And the notion of mixed income housing does not address them at all. In fact, this housing is not meant for them at all. So when they talk about us trying to preserve our neighborhood and our communities, which also includes renters, and saying we don't want them in our backyard because all of this development is going to allow for affordability and more people to have housing, that's not true. That is not true, because those people, the 40, the 50,000 individual / families who are on a waiting list for affordable housing cannot afford what they're building. All right, so I know we're over time. I see Sergio, you have spoken. Ryan, can you identify yourself, please, Ryan?
Yeah, hi, my name is Ryan. I'm a part of a kind of coalition building movement around the university townhome. So I just wanted to jump in really quick here and say, like, we're really looking to partner with more and more people and build up coalition around this. My colleague Shiming dropped her email address in the sidebar chat, and I'll drop mine as well. And then we have a petition going around that. So if you reach out to either of us, great, or you sign the petition. Again, this is active. This is organizing work. I'm so sorry for stepping in that way, but I just wanted to make sure that I let people know that we are talking a lot with residents and trying to do something about it. And I appreciate Mary bringing that up.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Catherine, you're muted.
I'd like to. So we have reached the end. I thank everybody for participating. Sergio, there will be another time. So we did try to get everybody to chime in to hear their voices, because your voice is important. We heard from authentic voices, voices from the community, voices who have had the experiences that we're trying to make happen less, if not get rid of entirely. We've had suggestions. I've been making notes of those suggestions. And I hope that we can have another community meeting and discussion soon, where we can kind of look at those suggestions and do something about it. Many of us are members of organizations, and I would suggest that we take this back to our organizations and try to work through developing a people's agenda, asking the churches to get back involved, and as part of the education of our community, ourselves, including our blocks, make sure we maintain the sense of community, reaching out, supporting each other, and standing up with each other to provide that resistance, as we know full well Philadelphia has a history of, provide that resistance against this gentrification and displacement of the Black community, but also the white working class community. All right, so if we can adjourn this meeting, I appreciate everybody coming.
Thank you to everybody. And I just
Thank
wanted to,
you.
I want to just echo what Dr. Montero said, Jahan said, what you've said. It has to be rooted in the Black worker and this revolutionary history. And it really is a history for all of us, for us as a country to move forward. I just wanted to emphasize that, and keeping people in their homes, preserving and protecting these communities, because they are our revolutionary communities. So thank you so much, Catherine, and the 46th Ward.
Right. So goodbye, everybody, and thank you. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, yeah, you can unmute.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Appreciate
you.
Okay, I appreciate all of you. And so we have our work to do, guys.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get busy. You two reclaim Sergio and Tamara. I know you. We'll be working with you and together.
Can you tell us when Ward 46
Oh,
hosted
don't
events?
talk
Can you
about
share that
Ward.
with the other committee people?
Listen, Sergio, wait a minute. Is this the only way you can get in contact with me? Don't you have my email address?
Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't get an email about this event that's hosted by our ward.
No, it was not posted by your ward.
That's what it said in the first slides.
No,
And Magna kept thanking our ward.
Hey, Sergio, we're
no,
not.
no,
gonna
no.
go there.
It's
No,
not
no,
the
no.
ward. Sorry, it's the
It's the RCO, Sergio. Not your ward. Okay. All right. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Great meeting, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
Good night.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
I really appreciate
Happy
you.
holidays, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy
And
holidays.
Jake, you know,
Huh?
Jake, I called you. You never responded to me. I wanted
call
you
me.
to be on the.
I ain't gonna
I'm
call.
glad you're here, Jake. All right.
All
Because
right,
I was going to beat you up.
Okay, okay.
And Chris, thank you for coming.
All right now.
Okay. Oh,
See you guys.
oh. Hey,
Nice
listen.
to see you, James.
Magna, thank you. Doc,
Good to see you
thank
too.
you. All right,
Yes,
Caleb,
everyone.
thank you.
Great presentation.
Okay, good. I really appreciate it. Jahan, thank you. I saw Kim over, I saw
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah. Jeremiah was there. Hey, Jeremiah. Jackie, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Great meeting.
Chris,
Great
thank
presentation,
you.
guys.
Chrissy Stevens and
Jahan,
Sergio.
did I
Go
repeat you?
ahead, I'm sorry.
Jahan.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Jahan. I'm sorry. Did you go to community college? Jahan?
No, no.
Okay, you had to leave. Okay, I'm trying to come out. Trying to leave. Oh, now I know.
Okay. All righty. Listen, everybody have a good holiday. I forgot to tell everybody have a good holiday, but you know, I try to be good, guys.
Caleb, turn off the recording. You can turn off the recording.
Okay, I will.
Thank you, Caleb.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Caleb.
You may want to say something.